Buying to renovate. What to look for before you sign in New York City. Buying to renovate is as exciting as it is risky. A pre-war apartment full of charm but with crumbling plumbing, or a SoHo loft full of potential but starved of light can look like an opportunity, right up until the moment you own it, and every problem in that floor plan becomes yours to solve. The gap between what a property could be and what it will cost to get there is where most buyers get into trouble, and almost all of that trouble is avoidable with the right due diligence before signing. 1. Look beyond finishes. Evaluate structure and systems. On a tour, paint color and dated cabinetry are easy to see and easy to change. What matters more is the skeleton underneath, and that is where a buyer planning to renovate needs to focus attention. Inspection area red flags to watch. Potential impact. Structural integrity. Cracks in walls, sagging ceilings, sloping floors, settlement or water damage can add six figures to costs before design work begins. Plumbing and electrical. Galvanized pipes, outdated wiring, complex replacement requiring permits and building approvals, adding time and cost. Ceiling height and load-bearing walls, unchangeable walls, tight clearances for HVAC and beams, limits open concept options, can restrict finished ceiling height in ways that are difficult to engineer around. Window size and orientation, limited natural light, poor solar exposure, affects perceived scale of a space and how livable it actually feels. A buyer who plans to renovate needs to think like a builder from the first walkthrough, because the prettiest listing photos mean very little if the infrastructure is poor or the layout fundamentally cannot be changed. 2. Know the building before you know the unit. In New York, every building has its own ecosystem of rules, approvals, and approval timelines that will shape what is possible, regardless of what the apartment itself allows. Building type, renovation restrictions, approval process, co-ops, most restrictive. Even minor work can require detailed drawings and engineering reports. Approval processes regularly run long. Condominiums, more flexibility, but may restrict plumbing relocation, wet over dry layouts, and construction hours. Moderate approval requirements. Landmarked buildings, exterior changes and window replacements regulated. Landmarks Preservation Commission approval, which can take months and may limit material choices. Before falling for a property, it is worth pulling the buildings and the units records from the Department of Buildings Public Database, BIS and DOB now, to check for open DOB and ECB violations, permits that were filed but never signed off, and signs of prior work done without permits. Those problems transfer with ownership. Legalizing someone else's unpermitted renovation can mean fines, new filings, and sometimes reopening finished walls. Bringing a renovation professional in before purchase rather than after is worth considering seriously. A pre-purchase consultation that weighs feasibility, code compliance, and realistic costs, with a designer, engineer, and someone familiar with DOB filings all in one conversation, can clarify what a property actually requires before a mortgage is signed. Calculate renovation potential, not just cost. A common mistake is treating what a renovation costs as equivalent to what it can achieve. In reality, what is achievable is defined by the layout's physical logic, not the budget alone. Ask these questions before buying. Does the plumbing stack allow you to move the kitchen or bathroom? Is there enough electrical capacity for modern appliances or central air? How flexible is the building about window or door modifications? Is there asbestos, lead paint, or hidden damage behind the walls? A realistic renovation plan starts with those physical possibilities, and having an architect or design build team assess them before purchase can prevent months of frustration after it. Think in terms of investment value. Renovating is not just about aesthetics, it is about equity. Some upgrades improve quality of life but do not always boost resale value. Others can transform both. Renovation type, long-term value. Kitchens and bathrooms tend to offer the strongest returns. Layout improvements and open plans carry long-term appeal. High-quality materials and neutral tones outlast trend-driven choices when it's time to sell. Any specific ROI figure should be treated with skepticism, since returns in New York swing widely by neighborhood, building type, and finish level. The more useful principle is whether what is being added genuinely improves daily living while strengthening long-term value. Assess what you can live through. Even when the finances and feasibility line up, logistics matter. A high-end Manhattan renovation often runs 6 to 12 months after design approvals, which means understanding in advance how long you can wait for move-in, whether you will live off-site during construction, and how well you would handle the delays that come from permits, supply chains, and contractor schedules. Having one integrated team handle architectural design through construction prevents the miscommunication that accumulates between separate vendors and keeps accountability in one place, which tends to mean fewer surprises and a finished space that feels cohesive rather than assembled from disconnected decisions. 6. The red flags. When to walk away. Sometimes the most valuable thing a pre-purchase analysis does is surface a reason not to buy. Red flag, why it matters. Severe structural issues, foundation cracks, roof instability, repair costs can approach or exceed the renovation's value. Plumbing or electrical upgrades the building will not permit, makes a plan unfeasible regardless of budget. Co-op restrictions that delay approvals by many months may push a realistic timeline beyond what the purchase makes sense to support. Ceiling clearance too low for required ductwork or below code minimums, a constraint that cannot be designed around. No natural light or ventilation, one of the few problems that cannot be affordably engineered in after the fact. When the bones are poor, no design can fix that, only conceal it. Why a pre-purchase consultation is worth the cost. Before signing, having a design-build firm evaluate a property as a project rather than just a property tends to surface what a standard inspection does not. A professional consultation typically covers whether a proposed layout is physically and legally feasible, a budget forecast with a realistic cost per square foot, a timeline estimate that accounts for DOB and board approvals, a risk assessment for structural and mechanical issues, a check of DOB records for existing violations and unpermitted work. Hopler Design and Build performs this for buyers across Manhattan and Brooklyn, helping them understand not just what a property contains, but what it can realistically become. Buying a home to renovate is both an emotional and a strategic act, and the difference between a renovation that drains a budget and one that produces the home you wanted comes down almost entirely to what you learn before you buy. The buyers who come out well study structure, systems, and approvals with the same attention they bring to their design ideas, and when they sign, they do it with a clear picture of what comes next. What building elements matter most before buying with renovation in mind? The structural system, column locations, load-bearing walls, and slab thickness determine what can be opened or reconfigured. Plumbing riser locations determine where wet areas can and cannot move. Electrical panel size determines whether a significant upgrade is needed. HVAC setup affects what ventilation options are available. Ceiling heights, particularly in pre-war buildings, define what is possible above as well as below. Window placement affects both layout and code compliance. Soundproofing and floor assemblies matter to buildings and neighbors. And the age and condition of existing wiring, pipes, and mechanicals can shift the budget significantly if they need full replacement. Understanding these before purchase prevents design plans that later turn out to be unfeasible or far more expensive than anticipated. How do co-op boards, condo policies, and landmark status shape what is possible? Co-op boards are often the most restrictive, with authority to prohibit moving wet areas, require extensive approvals and architect reviews, and enforce limited working hours and strict construction timelines. Condos are generally more flexible but still require permits, insurance, and alteration agreements, and enforce noise and scheduling rules. Landmarked buildings require Landmarks Preservation Commission approval for exterior changes and may restrict materials and details to match historic character, which lengthens timelines and affects design flexibility. Together, these rules determine what can be changed, how long approvals will take, and what is possible before the first nail is ever hammered. That is the value of a pre-purchase consultation, what the project will ultimately cost, and how much design freedom actually exists regardless of budget.